You know what you should do? You should follow me on Twitter at Brommer018. Link in the description. Do it now. What is going on, guys? Thank you for joining me yet again in another FIFA 20 custom tactics video, the series where we recreate and adapt real life systems in game so that they'll work quite effectively. Today we switch our focus finally onto the first Bundesliga team in this season. It's taken us a while to get here, but we are finally here, and it is with one that is an extremely popular suggestion. You guys have not stopped beating the gun about me doing this tactic. RB Leipzig. It is by far the most requested tactic on the channel, and we are finally getting around to it today. Now I'm going to start this video by saying this is going to be a long one. Do not get me wrong here. We've got 3 different systems that we're going to switch our focus to, because anyone who has watched Leipzig will know that they play a range of different tactics and formations, and really it's all a lot of the same thing, but you know, I've isolated it down to 3 systems that you can use in game. You know, a defensive game plan, a balanced, and an attacking one. So you know, we're really going to switch our focus onto them today, and this system, or the philosophy in general, with Naglesmann's Leipzig, is it's all about fluidity of movement and work rate. You know, you've got those 2 things in abundance here, and that's how you create all these mismatch options, you know, amongst the opposition. So, you know, we'll explore it, we'll go through, I'll explain how they do things and why they do things, and then we'll go from there. So yeah, strap yourselves in. It's going to be a long one. We'll start off with the balanced tactic, and as you'll see, we've got the 4-2-2-2 here, and these guys are both right and left attacking midfielders, so make sure you set them in the instructions there. But other than that, there's not a whole lot you have to do. So we can move on to the player instructions first, before coming on to the tactics. So first off, we've got the goalkeeper, and he's on comes to crosses and sweeper keeper. Now, as you'll see in the tactics, we're not going to play an enormously high line, but we still want him to be sweeper keeper, because he's essentially playing the part of an 11th outfield player. He's happy and more than comfortable taking the ball at his feet when he needs to, and that's really the role of a sweeper keeper. So you know, you get that along with comes to crosses, where, you know, as we talked about in the past, it's very easy. It makes it a lot easier to defend those situations when the keeper who are highly protected in FIFA are just you know, a little bit overpowered in those situations. So moving on to the back line, with the 2 centre backs, you don't have to change anything there. Keep them both on stay back while attacking. Meanwhile, with the fullbacks, of course, you have them on join the attack and overlap. So this is fairly self-explanatory for a defence. For all of them, really. You know, you don't have to do too much. Keep them on normal interceptions as well, as we've spoken about in past videos. You don't need to unless I specify otherwise, and I will be specifying in this video during these tactics. There will be a few players on aggressive interceptions, so bear with me on that one. But with the back 4, you can keep them as it is, and you know, you shouldn't need to do too much there. So now we can move on to the 2 holding midfielders. Now, we've got a lot to talk about here. First off, we've got man marks. So with their system, it's very man orientated, and they emphasize employ a man press, basically, is what I'm trying to say. And they'll make sure they stick to their men as tight as possible. Now, all their players, and as we spoke about at the start of the video about fluidity of movement, all their players are very, very mobile and very energetic. Therefore, actually, it's a lot more effective for them to employ a man marking system, because they can stick with their men a lot easier. That's why, you know, you tend to find a lot of teams with less mobility and less pace will be, you know, sort of employing sort of more of a lane press and a lane marking system and zonal systems. But in this case, you've got very athletic players, and for anyone buying players on, you know, career mode or the other game mode that we don't mention, if you want the right players, and of course I will leave suggestions for players, but if you want the right players, make sure they're very mobile and very energetic. I will mention it a bit later on, but this system will absolutely destroy your players for stamina. They will be so tired it is untrue how draining it is. So if you're going to use these systems, you better be prepared to have tired players. It's simple as that. That's how it works. And you know, you'll see all my suggestions on the right hand side will be players with lots of stamina, high stamina. So if you're playing in career mode, for example, make sure you've got a full squad, 22 plus players. In fact, if you're doing a Road to Glory series and you're playing with a team lower down, you know, one of the worse off teams, low star teams, etc., I would advise not using this system. This is for the elite players with lots of stamina and lots of technical ability. So, you know, do just bear that in mind. So, yeah, we've got them both on man mark. Bit of a tangent there, but we got there in the end. And they're both on stay back while attacking as well. So, you know, with the two fullbacks overlapping and then the four front men who are, you know, sort of exchanging positions and constantly moving around and, you know, employing their technical ability. You've got these two, the engines kind of in midfield and the dirty men. So they'll both stay back while attacking and provide that protection should the opposition try and hit you on the counter attack. Both of them cover centre as well. You've got the wide areas more than covered with the two wide men on each side. So keep these in the centre and you'll get that rigid sort of, you know, do your job mentality. Next up, we have the interception. So what you'll notice is one of these are on conservative and the other's on aggressive. So the reason being is that I'm trying my best here to replicate the fact that usually it'll be one man will cover and the other man will press aggressively in these two central midfielders. So obviously you can't keep changing that within a game. So you have to do one or the other. And in this case, I've got Tyler Adams is the more aggressive man. He'll press the ball more, whereas Lima will, you know, stay back and cover any space sort of in behind him and make sure you don't just get it played around you. So, you know, you can make the choice who you want, but I've gone for here Adams, who's a little bit more energetic, a little more aggressive, to have aggressive interceptions, whereas Lima on conservative. So now we can move on to the right and attacking midfielders, right and left attacking midfielders even. So first off, come back on defence, and one thing I want to say is we talked about work rate. It's essentially an 11-0 formation because every player is sort of, in a way, contributing to both attack and defence. And you'll find it with the strikers as well when we come on to them. Both of them will be tracking back and they'll form a defensive shape. So it's the same with the attacking midfield as well. You want both of these come back on defence and they will cover as much ground as possible. They can do both areas of the game very, very well. So yeah, both of these will be on comeback on defence, and then with support on crosses, get into the box for the cross as well, and you'll do that on both of them. With Paulson, well, we'll come on to him anyway, but with Paulson, he'll be dropping off, playing as a false nine and a target man, which means, you know, with these two getting into the box, then you've still got those targets when they are trying to whip balls in. With positioning freedom, you want both of these on free roam. So we're trying to recreate that fluidity of movement as much as possible. And you'll notice in the gameplay on the right-hand side, it's very, very effective because you've got players, you know, constantly moving around and being mobile. So they're finding space for themselves. Or if not, they're dragging out the opposition defender who's marking them, in which case they're creating space from where they've left off for another player to run into, because everyone is constantly moving, constantly running, and it's such a nightmare for the opposition. So, you know, when it's employed right, it's extremely effective, and as you'll see from the gameplay here, works out very well for me indeed. So now we can move on to the two strikers. First off, we've talked about him already. We've got Yusuf Paulson here. Very, very good for this role. He's on false nine. He's essentially a target man who drops off. But when you set it to target man on this, you know, they're still sort of playing on the last one, but just backing into the opponent. Whereas with false nine, you can get them dropping off. And, you know, he's really using his skills very well in this situation because, like I say, he's very tall, very strong, and he's athletic as well. So, you know, it's extremely effective. With support runs, have him on stay central. Werner will be the one drifting out wide. With Paulson, he is, like I say, that target in the middle, and he's that out ball as well. So you can look to him in those central areas to hold the ball up, and then you've got all the other players running off him. With interceptions, he's on aggressive. Both the strikers will be on aggressive interceptions. You want them pressing the back line as much as possible, and this is the best way to replicate that in game. And like I say, they will get tired. You know, it's just the nature of the game. If you want to recreate this system as effectively as possible, you know, players will get tired. So you'll have to bear that in mind, you know, and you just have to deal with it. And finally, with defensive support, like we spoke about, it's essentially an 11 formation because everyone's contributing to both phases of play. And this is how we replicate that here with these on comeback on defence. It's the same with Werner as well, who we can move on to, except he's on basic because with Poulsen, you got him as a false 9, so he's already dropping off. But with Werner, because of the fact that he's running in behind a little bit more, you'll have him on basic. So you've still got that out ball going forward. He's on aggressive interceptions as well, Werner, except this time he's on getting behind, as we've already spoken about, utilising his pace, and this time drifting wide as well. He's getting into those wide areas, unlike Poulsen, who of course we've got to stay central. So you've got that nice balance. It's essentially the big man, little man combination that I certainly have known and loved over the years. It works really well here. They complement each other both very well. And you know, I'd advise that for you guys as well. Make sure you've got with your target man someone like Poulsen, someone very tall, who's confident on the ball, very strong. Whereas with Werner, you've got someone who's more, a bit more pacey, maybe a bit smaller, but he's getting into those channels and those areas a lot more effectively. So that's the player instructions for the first one. Now we can move on to tactics. And first off, in defensively, we have constant pressure. This is going to be a running theme amongst all three tactics that we are going to cover. Constant pressure always. They're constantly trying to press the opposition. Very, very simple. Like I say, they want the ball back as quickly as possible, and it's important to say they don't want the ball back just so they can pass it around. I mean, we'll come on to that. In fact, we will come on to that shortly. With defensive width, we have this on 2. So obviously, you're trying to stamp out as much of an opportunity for the opposition to play through you as possible. And with it being essentially a 4-4-2, a 4-2-2-2, whatever you want to call it, of course there is going to be a little bit more space in the central areas because you've got more men out wide. So you counteract that by moving the width down to 2. And with depth, we have this on 6. So it's more of a mid-block. And what we're trying to replicate here is the fact that when the opposition are playing out from the goalkeeper, they won't press. But as soon as the opposition step out of their defensive third and then move into the midfield third, that's when all of a sudden Leipzig will come alive and they're, you know, aggressively pressing, you know, employing a gegen-press essentially. So, you know, that's the best way that we can replicate that in game is by employing a mid-block, and then obviously they're a little bit deeper and then they start pressing then. And in terms with the lines of engagement as well. So, you know, you've got less space in between each line of the formation, which is very important, so teams just can't play over the top of each line. So on to offense now, and I want to talk about possession. So they don't just have possession for possession's sake. It's essentially what's the best way to put it? A vertical attacking system, an emphasis on vertical attack. And what that is you're not just constantly passing between the lines, patiently trying to open possession. With that fluidity of movement that we've spoken about, you're constantly trying to create an opening and create an attacking move. And that's why they move so much. That's why there's such an emphasis on, you know, just constant movement, constant exploring and trying to create space. So yes, you have this on possession, but at the same time you're trying to go forward a lot more rather than, you know, risking just save possession and not really getting anywhere. With width, we have this on 3, therefore your players are going to come more centrally and show that option rather than with width 10, for example, where there's going to be so much space, but you're not going to be able to effectively play to each player. With the instructions, we've been able to sort of recreate that, players getting into space, etc. So you don't need to recreate that through the width. Players in the box have this on 7, meaning that you will have the left and attacking midfielders, left and right attacking midfielders, and also Werner as well getting into the box, whereas Poulsen will be sort of circulating on the edge as the false 9. So you've still got that protection in the outer levels. And finally, with corners and free kicks, we have both of these on 4 each. The reason being is that then you'll have 2 men back, which is more than enough to counteract the opposition counter-attacking, because they only ever leave 1 man forward. But then you've got an extra target in the box, which is very important for corners and free kicks that are very tough on this game and not very effective at all. So that's the first one done. We can now move on to one of the other systems. So I'm going to start off with the defensive one, and I've set this as a 5-3-2. This is another one they use very, very regularly as well. So there's a bit of differences in here, but there's still the same sort of philosophy that you'll see in play. So obviously, you don't need to change any positions here. We've got it as a normal 5-3-2. And, you know, we'll go into the instructions first. Like I say, there's going to be a lot of similarities here between each system. So first off with the keeper, exactly the same. You'll see comes to crosses and sweeper keeper as well. There's no change needed there. With the centre-backs, also stay back while attacking and normal interceptions as well. You will occasionally see a centre-back sort of storm forward, but not enough for me to justify, you know, sort of changing one of these to join the attack. So keep them on stay back while attacking. Very occasionally, should you want to get a centre-back to sort of storm forward and bring the ball out of the defence, then you can choose to do that. But you won't need to, you know, change any roles for that need. Normal interceptions on all of these as well. On the wingbacks, of course, join the attack and overlap, exactly the same as the fullbacks in the other formation. You'll notice I'm not suggesting any more players here because you should need the same players. Again, they have a set of players who are just so versatile, and that's the most important thing, and you should always look for that when signing players as well for this system. You want players who are versatile. They can play in lots of different positions, and even if they can't play in different positions on this game, if they have the attributes to, you can put them in that position. So for example, someone like what can we do here, Klosterman, for example. He's actually not a centre-back on this game. He's right back or left back. But look, he has the attributes to play. He's tall, he's very strong, he's very good defensively. So there's no reason for him not to be able to play in one of the centre-back roles in a back three. So, you know, we put him there. Of course, you can change out how you want to, but, you know, that's just an example. So, yeah, join the attack and overlap for the two wing-backs. Next up, we have the three central midfielders, and this is where it changes a little bit. So we've got this sort of holding mid here, who he's going to play like a holding mid anyway. So he's going to be on stay back while attacking, and he's going to be on stay on the edge of the box as well. But most importantly, he's going to have conservative interceptions. And what that is going to do here is he's going to back off a little bit more and allow the other two to sort of press the opposition more. So he's still providing that protection. He's not too wild. He's not moving out of position too much. And he's essentially that pivot, both in possession and also when the opposition have got the ball. So that's how you recreate that most effectively. Also, you want him on cover centre as well. So again, he's not being drawn out to either side, and that's the most important thing. And here again, I've gone for Lima, but you know, you guys go for who you want to for the other two. But that's where it changes for the other two. Now, first off, you got them on get forward. So these are going to provide as much support as possible. And remember that these are right and left central midfielders, not just central midfielders. Therefore, they're going to come out wide a little bit more and provide that support in the wide areas, because obviously now you're lacking wingers, so you need that little bit of support when you can. And because they're right and left central midfielders, you can get that. So first off, they're both on get forward. That's very self-explanatory. They're going to provide support to the wing backs and also the two strikers as well, but they're also on aggressive interceptions. And the reason being is that obviously you've got, when you're out of possession, these two are pressing the man and pressing the opposition, whilst Lima, for example, in this situation is the one covering for them. So with that in mind, you know, with aggressive interceptions, yes, it's going to drain their stamina a bit more, but it replicates their role as efficiently as you can in FIFA. So it's very, very important to do that. And finally, make sure that these are on cover wing as well, because as we spoke about, they are going to be covering out wide as much as possible. And with only wing backs and not wingers, you know, you will need that extra support when the opposition are trying to double up on you out wide. So yeah, that's both of them covered. Now we can move on to the two strikers. Again, with Paulson, exactly the same instructions. False 9, stay central, aggressive interceptions, and come back on defence. Like I say, it's the philosophy carries over regardless of the tactic. I mean, really, the formation is second nature to all of them, because you know, it's not quite as important. It's about the philosophy and the way they're sort of employing themselves, the tactics themselves and the system, not so much the formation. You know, the formation is changed really based on, you know, a number of factors, one being the opposition, both how to counteract them and how to defend against them as well. So, you know, with say if you're playing against someone such as I'm playing against Dortmund in this, you know, with them playing at essentially a 5 at the back, you just got a bit more protection basically, but you've still got that emphasis on counter attack because you've got the 2 forwards going forward. So, you know, it's very important that, you know, it's still the same sort of philosophy amongst any formation that you play. And that's replicated with Werner as well. He has exactly the same instructions: drift wide, getting behind, aggressive interceptions, and basic defensive support as well. Again, with the aggressive interceptions, and we'll come on to the tactics very shortly. There's a slightly lower block, but you've still got that constant pressure. So that's why you've got both the strikers set to aggressive interceptions. So now we can move on to the tactics. So first off, again, yeah, constant pressure. Even though it's a defensive system, you know, keep this on constant pressure. Again, there's no need for them to change their philosophy. They will employ it as much as they possibly can. And that's the most impressive thing about this system, is that they still play in the same way regardless of the formation that they're playing or the opposition that they're against. And so you've got a little bit more protection with a 5 at the back, but you're still on constant pressure, so you're still trying to seize the initiative. With width this time we have it on 3 rather than 2, and the reason being is that because you're not playing a 4-4-2 anymore, you're playing a 5-3-2, you've got more players in those central areas, so you're actually already going to be quite narrow anyway, and it's going to be harder for the opposition to play through you because they're more crowded. So with it on 3, you're actually going to find it's going to be harder for the opposition to play through you than it is with it on 2 on the other system, because of the fact that you've crowded out those central areas more. But with it on 3, it's still narrow, but you're a little bit wider, particularly the fullbacks to get out wide when they need to. With depth, we move this from 6 down to 5. Not too much there, just offers a little bit more protection, but it's still a mid-block, and that's the most important thing. But with it moved down for 1, you just got a slightly deeper line, so you're trying to counter, you know, particularly players online who are trying to play the ball, exploit the ball over the top, and really affect you that way. Offensively, possession, again, it's exactly the same going forward. They're always trying to look for that vertical sort of emphasis on attacking, and create as much space and be as mobile as possible. So yeah, exactly the same throughout all 3 of these tactics. There's no need to change that. With width, you can have this on 4. So obviously, with it being a more narrow system, as we just mentioned, you know, get it into the more balanced sort of width rather than something narrow here, because then the fullbacks will get a little bit wider. The right and left central midfielder will as well, as will the strikers as well. So, you know, you're just trying to exploit that space as best as you possibly can. And this is the best way to do it. But with 4, you've still got that emphasis on short possession play. With players in the box, this is still on 7. So this time you've got the 2 strikers, and then you've got one of the 2 out of the left and right central midfielders, and then hopefully one should just be circling on the edge of the box as well, being that pivot, and picking up any loose balls that may or may not be sort of deflected, cleared by the defence, etc. So yeah, that'll be as effective as it can. And finally, as I've already explained, corners and free kicks are both on 4. So that's the defensive system done. I've got to say, this is very effective. These 2 systems are certainly the most effective. I mean, we'll come on to the attacking one very shortly, but I think as a 5 at the back systems go, I think this one is very good. It's very good indeed. Not quite. If you've watched my tactics tier list video, you'll know that I'm a very big fan of Gasparini's Atalanta system. Not quite on that level. But very, very good, and it does offer you more protection than, say, Gasparini's Atalanta would, to be fair. So, you know, I think this is one that's definitely up there. So that is the balance and defensive systems done. Now we can move on to the attacking. Now, I will cover this one, you know, and I'm going to show you guys how to do it anyway. But I want to preface this by saying I don't really think you should bother using this, to be honest. I don't think you get enough of an upside from it compared to the balanced 4-4-2 to justify using it. You'll see in the gameplay, hopefully, I should have on the right hand side now of this next one, you know, that I did use this, you'll see, you know, we're in control of the game, but it's a lot of possession for possession's sake, and not enough emphasis on the vertical passing game. And the reason being is that because you've got these two here who are actually set as right and left forwards, so you know, you've essentially got three strikers, three out-and-out strikers there, because that's how the right and left forwards play. But there's not really any justification to do that. It essentially means that possession is just going to come a little bit more stagnant, you know, because they're sort of with the defenders, they're behind the midfield line, and you can't get it through to them as much. So, you know, I'll try my best to make it as effective as I can. You'll find yourself having a lot of possession in this system. But I think it's a little bit tougher to break teams down. So, like I say, I'm going to show you because this is, along with the other two formations, the most commonly used. So, you know, it does need covering. But, like I say, I think you guys should not bother with this one. And instead stick with the 4-2-2-2 because I 100% had the most fun playing that system. I thought it was the most effective. So, you know, there's not really any need to switch to an attacking 3-4-2-1. But I'll cover it for you anyway. So, obviously here, as we've already said, these two are right and left forwards, and then these two, rather than wing backs, are left and right midfielders. But obviously, with the instructions, we'll have them on comeback on defence, so they'll fill in as wing backs when they need to, as you'll see via the gameplay. So yeah, the keeper stays as he is with the roles. No need to change anything there, and the same with the three centre backs as well, as we've already spoken about. There's no need to change any of the instructions in that situation. With the wingers slash wing backs, we have, of course, comeback on defence. So obviously they'll then bed in to that 5-back when they need to. And we also have these on stay wide as well. So of course these two are creating the width as the sole sort of players out wide. You will of course have the two right and left forward drifting wide when they need to, but generally they'll you know, be in more central areas because of course they are strikers. So with them staying wide, you've got that emphasis. With support runs, you actually want these on come short rather than getting behind. And the reason being why they don't really run in behind as much is because, one, if they're trying to run in behind, you've got less players to play out from the back. So, for example, let's say comes to one of the centre-backs, say Mukiele, for example, Klosterman runs in behind. He's only got that ball to play over the top then. He doesn't have that short option. Whereas if Klosterman comes short, then you've got, say, Nkunku as the right forward here, who can also run in behind. So you've got that emphasis then, and you've got both options. So you can still go forward, and that's, of course, the emphasis on this is vertical and going forward. But you've got two options rather than one. You're not sort of limited to one. So make sure these are on come short. And finally, we have these on stay at the edge of the box as well for the crosses, because if they both commit to the cross and they get into the box, then you're going to find yourself vacant going back. And because there's only two central midfielders, they can't cover everything, can't cover the width and man the central areas as well. So with this, you've still got that protection going back in terms of the opposition counter-attack. So they are the instructions for both of them. Now we can move on to the central midfielders. So first off, both of these will stay back while attacking. That's because Klosterman and Sabitzer, whilst they're not getting, well, I mean, Sabitzer in this case, obviously he's not going to be the wing back, but he's just there in this game plan. So the left and the right-sided wing backs will get forward, basically, is what I'm trying to say. They'll be the ones overlapping, along with the three strikers. So, therefore, both Adams and Lima, in this case, they're two central midfielders, will provide that protection going backwards. Whereas if they're committing, you're going to find yourself very open to the counter-attack, and there's no need for that to be the case. So, both of these on stay back while attacking, and also stay on the edge of the box as well. Again, very self-explanatory. You don't need them getting into the box. What we've done here, though, in terms of interceptions, is we've reversed the roles. So you'll have remember me talking about in the initial 4-4-2 tactic that we have one on conservative and one on aggressive, because one is essentially pressing the man on in possession, whereas the other one is covering any space in behind. So obviously we had Adams being aggressive on the other one. This time I've just swapped it around just again to show you guys, you know, you can choose whichever one you want, really. Doesn't really make a difference. So this time Adams is on conservative interceptions. He's the one covering, whereas Lima is the one pressing the man in possession. Also here we are going to have these guys on cover center. Forgot to change those, but again, as we've already explained, of course these guys are covering the center, because obviously if you find one of these is coming out wide, you've only got one central midfielder then, and then you are going to be exploited going forward in those central areas. So yeah, make sure both of these are on cover center. So that rounds off the midfield. Now we can move on to the three forwards. First off, we've got, well, the right and left forward, they're both exactly the same. In this situation, by the way, I should emphasise, obviously the game plan changes it, but it should be Poulsen as the central striker, where Werner is, and Werner should be out where Poulsen is. So just bear that in mind. You know, obviously the game plan messes it up and whatnot, but obviously you can change that if and when you come to it. So with the right and left forward, first off, you want both of these drifting wide, as we've already explained. They'll come out and they'll support the wing backs if and when they can. But also they're going to create and exploit as much space as possible, and that's why you also have them on getting behind. Both of these guys should be more mobile, should be pacey, basically like Werner, basically just have the similar attributes and similar play style to Timo Werner. So with them on drift wide, getting behind, you know, you can exploit their attributes as best as you can. Similar to as we've had all the strikers here, we want them on aggressive interceptions so that when the back line come out, they're pressing them as much as possible and they're really trying to win the ball off them, defending from the very front. And it's the same, as I say, with the other right forward as well. And finally, you want them both on comeback on defence. You want to, you know, give the defensive phase of the game as much support as you possibly can. So with that, you do have this, you know, in abundance there. And finally, we can move on to the central striker. As I said, this should be Poulsen, so you want to recreate that target man sort of feel as much as you can. So first off, have him on stay central. Of course, he's going to be that pivot and that out ball as much as he possibly can, and have him on false 9 as well. So with these two strikers on getting behind, then you've got him dropping off, and then you're creating the mismatch option as much as possible. Do the opposition defense go with him, in which case you're creating space for the other two to run into, or if they don't, then he's picking it up deep and he can start to work on opening then. So with him on false 9, you can recreate that as best as you possibly can. On defensive support this time, you want him on basic rather than come back. So just so he can be that out ball when going forwards. Whereas if they're all back, you've got less emphasis on that. And with two strikers already tracking back, you don't really need the third one doing it as well. So that rounds it off for instructions. Finally, we can come on to the tactics in this system. So again, constant pressure, I don't need to explain that anymore. We've already talked about that to death in this video. On defensive width, you want this on 4. Yet again, of course, we've already spoken about how there's no need to have it on a narrow system like 2, because of course you've got those central areas more figured with the 3 central backs, and in this case the 3 central forwards as well. So you can have this on 4 and you can really get out wide when you need to. With depth, we actually move this up to 10. So obviously this is more of an attacking system, as we've got this on the attacking game plan. So therefore, rather than having a mid block, we can have a little bit of a higher block now. And then what happens is that because you've got the 3 strikers, it really you know, comes into its element then. That's one thing, as we've already spoken about at the start of covering this particular formation, you'll have a lot of possession, and this plays into it because you're going to win ball back very, very efficiently, and then you're playing from there. It's more in the attacking side where, you know, sort of a couple more problems arise. Of course, possession, I don't need to talk about that either. We've already explained that. With width, you have this on 4 yet again. So obviously there's no need to have this out wide because you're trying to complement that, you know, possession-based style as much as you possibly can here. So with it on 4, they're going to be in a sort of a balanced sort of phase of play. With players in the box, again, on 7. So you've got the 3 strikers this time, and then anyone else is sort of circling, being the pivot around the edge of the box. But it's mainly about just the 3 strikers getting into the box here. And finally, on corners and free kicks, again, on 4. I don't need to talk about that one either, as I have already done so many times. Oh, so that's it in the end, guys. This one's been certainly the longest tactics video we've done so far. I've rambled on for quite a while here. You know, so the overall sort of verdict on these 3 systems is very, very effective, particularly the 4-4-2 and the 5-3-2. The 3-4-2-1, not so much. I didn't enjoy playing with it, really. I found it a lot of possession for possession's sake. It's harder to play a vertical system because you've got the free strikers, believe it or not. So, you know, I think really, if I was to advise you guys anything, it would be just to play this system, and when you want to be a bit more defensive, switch to the 5-3-2. Otherwise, there's not a lot of need to play the 3-4-2-1. Of course, by all means, give it a try yourself. Maybe you guys will have more success with it than me. Maybe I was just doing something wrong, but I have tried and tested it as best as I can, and I believe the 3-4-2-1 was slightly less effective. Hopefully that has settled a lot of you down now that we have covered this tactic. I hope you really enjoyed it, and I hope it's lived up to expectations. You know, keep your suggestions coming in now. Obviously, we don't have one that's sort of the overarching favourite. It was always the likes of this tactic that was the most suggested, etc., and the Man United ones are, you know, all of them. So now we don't have one that's sort of been the outright number one. So keep your suggestions coming in. And you know, we'll see how it goes. If you have enjoyed this video, please do leave a like, but most importantly, subscribe to the channel for more regular gaming content, and ring the bell so that you get notifications every time I upload as well. Don't forget to check out any of my other series, such as my Fixing FIFA series, which was a wishlist series, but it's changed to a Fixing FIFA series now. You know, I would really appreciate that if you did check that out, because they take a lot of time to sort of do, you know, I think a lot of you will be interested in sort of the ideas we have. If you've got any other suggestions for the channel, please do leave them in the comment section as well, and I'll do my best to get back to you and reply to as many of them as I can. On that note, we are going to round it off there. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.